If you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, click the like and subscribe button below as it helps with the algorithm so you'll be notified when new and exciting episodes come out. Getting into like the actual expedition side, one who got you into it was it Paul? And then also how did you end up, I guess, and was the Sistema Huatala expedition back in 95 with Bill Stone, was that kind of the origins of everything for you?
Yeah, I mean, my first big expedition was with Bill Stone and Paul Heinerth, my first husband, and a small group in Sistema Huatala in Mexico, uh, and yeah, it was nothing I had really planned. in, in a sense, I
You've
was
been on
actually
that.
yeah, no, I it was funny. I was going to watch Paul's dive shop while he went off on this expedition. So I flew over from the Cayman Islands and I said, "Oh, you know what? I need to go get my car from Canada so I have something to drive while I'm watching your shop." And he says, "I'll come with you. You don't want to make that drive on your own back to Florida." So we picked up my car, and on the way back, we stopped at Bill Stone's place and immediately, struck up a friendship. I actually tinkered around in his garage with a few regulators, fixing them up from a mess he'd brought home from a previous expedition. And by the time we'd spend a couple days there, Bill's like, "Do you want to come on the expedition?" And I'm like,
Wow, that's
"Yeah." So yeah, I definitely, when I look back on my life, I think that there were opportunities when I was invited on something or I volunteered, and then that really opened doors for the future.
yeah, I've always had like a philosophy that like in life you want to be able to just say yes, and being
Mhm,
able to say yes sometimes just
mhm.
opens up so many other doors you never had an idea existed.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Now when you were going to do that, did you?
Mhm.
I mean, I imagine you're on like regular, open circuit. Like, at what point did you realize like, oh, we're actually like the magnitude of it going down? I mean, did you have regular spelunking or caving experience? And then, like, take us through what was your experience like
Yeah, I
going
mean, as
through
a
that?
kid, I liked to do a bit of dry caving. I really always liked that three-dimensional space. But even in my open water class, I was taken on a little like baby sort of cavern dive, and that got me pretty excited. But yeah, by the time we were going to Watla, that was a whole new ball game. I really was just going to go along to volunteer and take care of base camp and do whatever needed to be done and to learn more about cave surveying. But then when we got there and experienced some pretty grim uh, water quality and difficult conditions, one of the people who was going to be a key diver sort of pulled back and said, I'm not comfortable in this. And at that point, I was like, well, I am. I learned to dive in crap. And I spent a night convincing Bill Stone that it'd be a really good idea to allow me to dive with Paul to continue the exploration work there, even in the difficult conditions.
Wow. And now, did you start on, or was it rebreathers right off the bat, or were you guys?
No, we were doing open circuit at that time, and but we were using helium. Those were some of my first helium dives, actually. But I had already, in tinkering around in Bill's garage, I had already seen the rebreathers that he was working on the Mark IV at that time, um, and so soon after, I was like all in. you know?
You weren't, like, nervous, like, "Oh, this guy's been." I mean, obviously, Bill Stone is a genius, but, like,
Yeah.
you weren't like, "Oh, this is like this is something being tested. Do I wanna be the one doing the testing?" Or, like, things always go wrong in the beginning when you're testing stuff out. Did you never have, like, nerves of, like, I don't know, I'm maybe a mile down in a cave in Mexico, like, testing something out, if anything goes wrong,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting. Back then, when the rebreathers were first sort of being dangled by Bill, I was like, "Holy moly, this can totally transform exploration and opportunity to go deeper, to go further, and everything else." Um, and I knew that this was the right tool for things that we were talking about, soon after. Um, and so I willingly went down that course. I mean, like, when I bought my first Mark V rebreather, well, Paul and I bought rebreathers. I remember saying to Bill, you know, "Who's gonna teach us?" And he said, "You'll figure it out." Because there were no classes back then. There were no structured programs for learning how to dive a rebreather. So that forced me to, like, start from ground zero, like, basically learn how to build it and understand everything about it, and that actually opened an interesting door for me doing more testing and development work for rebreathers in the '90s and 2000s. Yeah.
Now, did getting doing it like I mean, I guess when you have to build it up from the ground up and you know every aspect of how it works, do you think that that's something that maybe has really helped you guys, that have been doing this for years and years and years versus people who are coming into it now and maybe
Mhm.
they don't know how to troubleshoot stuff or
Yeah. Well, plus because these were such new tools and very complicated devices, the ones I was first using, they broke all the time. You know, we never assumed that things were going to work, and I think that was clearly beneficial to us and creating a really strong safety and protocol ethic. Because today, you go put down your credit card, you buy a shiny rebreather, it's ready to go out of the box. You don't have to build any of the parts. And then it's reliable. Like, you could go hundreds and hundreds of hours and never have something that scares the crap out of you, where we would go if we went a day without something scaring the crap out of us, we were doing something wrong. Um, so I actually value the fact that I learned when stuff broke all the time, because then I had to learn how to fix it. I had to learn how to deal with it, how to prevent those issues.
gotcha, and then like you said, you guys really set up a system so that you could have,
Mhm.
bailout and, how much you were gonna have if you needed to, if you were certain
Yeah,
depth into the cave and,
yeah.
gotcha, gotcha. So
And that
that's
that had to be a clearly open-minded approach, right? Because and it still is in my mindset. There's not one way to do anything, because there's not one body that's the same shape and size and the same issues. Every dive is so different in the environments that I dive in. So it did also foster that open-minded ethic, so that 10 years down the road, when I saw someone, hanging their bottles differently, I'd be like, "Ah, that's a good idea. I think I'll bring that into what I'm doing."
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
always being open-minded kinda
Yeah.
leaves you open to trying new things.
Yeah.
Um, Now also with I guess, did you meet Brian out on the same project, or how did you
Yeah.
end up meeting Brian?
Yeah, yeah, it's been God, I was just thinking about this because Brian Keiko was just with me last week, but we've been diving together for 30 years now.
That's such an awesome thing. What were you guys
Yeah.
working on? You guys were up by your hometown, right? I think you guys were working on something?
Oh, up here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Canada's longest underwater cave system is a couple hours from where I live now, and I'm doing a lot of research on the biology in the cave system. And Brian said he was available. I'm just kind of catching up after a summer of dealing with cancer. I'm back in the water again, and but wanting to catch up on my data. So Brian said, "I can come up. I can help." And I'm like, "Yes," So it's great to show him the cave.
That's awesome. Now, well,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I had no idea with the,
Oh,
how are you doing
yeah.
with that?
I'm doing good. I've still got a round of treatments in December, but I'm back in the water, and I feel like this is the devil I know now. Everything's going to be just fine.
Nice, and
Yeah.
you're feeling, like, strong and healthy again
Yeah.
with it?
Yeah, I feel
Nice.
good. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. You look good, so
Thanks.
I had no idea that there were did you know back in the day when you were diving in Tobermory that there was this big cave system up in not that far from you?
No. No, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, there are caves in Tobermory too, and I had, early on, before cave diving training, dived in a cave in Tobermory, but I had no idea about this one out in Ottawa. Yeah,
Yeah, that's this is
yeah.
what's so interesting is they're putting so many rules on everything, but you guys back in the day, it's like we joke around about how we used to be able to just go climb in a tree, and now everybody's, worried about everyone's safety and this and that, but it's kind of cool how you guys really just got to kinda experiment on your own and all this
Yeah,
cool stuff that you guys got from it. So,
yeah.
okay, so then you start I guess the other thing is with Bill's expedition and whatnot, like, you guys were
Uh-huh,
spending, what, weeks
uh-huh.
underground? How was it, like, adapting to complete darkness and then the noise with the water and,
Yeah.
yeah, what was like that?
Yeah, so we were actually working at what's called the resurgence, where the water comes out of the bottom of the mountain. So we were actually camping, like under the stars at night, basically. But a lot of Bill's expeditions are deep sub expeditions where, if you're involved in the diving, then you're spending a couple months inside the cave. And like I remember, my good friend Phil Short when he did some pretty extreme diving in the mountains from the top down. And when he came out of the cave, he looked like a POW. I mean, he looked half starved and pale.
Emaciated and
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
wow.
And Bill's still doing that work today. I mean, he's right now planning another return to that area, and my hat's off to him. It's like as hardcore athletic work as you can imagine.
Yeah, that's not easy stuff.
No.
Um, and we'll
Yeah.
touch into because then I think when we get into Wakulla, he also
Mm,
some of the stuff you were testing for him too, which,
mhm.
I guess actually we could,
Yeah.
I guess so I guess that transitions in is
Mhm.
so then you were working with him over in Wakulla Springs, right? And
Mhm.
what was the expedition that you guys were
Yeah. So during the expedition in Huautla, we were sitting around the campfire going, "Man, like, the visibility is so bad at the front of the cave that we were exploring by feel." And I said to him, "How can we map a cave that we can't even see? Like, the difficulty in surveying is really challenging." And he said, "Tanic vision." And I'm like, "What?" And he says, I've actually, started down the road of starting to design this device that can map a cave that you can't see." And he says, "I need 2 years, about a $1.5 million, probably 150 volunteers to pull it off." And I'm like, "I'm in." So that Wakulla expedition actually started around a campfire, years earlier in Huautla. So I ended up Paul and I ended up buying some of the first rebreathers, and we also became the home to a set of 6 team rebreathers, so that people from around the world could come and train and prepare to do dives that hadn't been contemplated before on rebreathers, and to create the first three-dimensional map of any subterranean space, dry or wet. And that's what the Wakulla project was. And when I look back on that now, in a way, that was kind of our moonshot. It was a crazy project with some really outrageous ideas that all paid off. And that mapping device that I drove through the cave back in the '90s is now an artificially intelligent, fully robotic, independent mapping device that we can just put in the water. It can find a cave, map a cave, bring it back, and I don't even have to get my feet wet.
Wow, that's like it's funny,
Yeah.
AI is really taking over all of our jobs even.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing, to watch a robot cave explorer, but it can go to the deepest depths of the ocean into contaminated water, but its ultimate mission is to go to Jupiter's moon, Europa, to explore the liquid ocean beneath the frozen surface. So,
That's
yeah.
so such an incredible thing and pretty awesome that you got to be part of that and test it
Yeah,
out, and
yeah.
was it easy to steer through the cave,
No.
especially on
It was like for those that dive scooters, it was a 330-pound scooter. It was over 6 feet long, and because of the length, like, it was trimmed pretty good, but it had to have these little wing canards, that you could move around like aircraft wings to help steer, because just muscling it when it's that long and heavy is difficult. So yeah, it was challenging. Plus, you have this little console where you're, marking your waypoints and doing certain things as you're driving this thing in breakneck current. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like it's so I mean, yeah, because I would have thought and even just the buoyancy on that, figuring out exactly how to get that neutrally buoyant
Yeah.
and then
And then because of the dives we were doing at Wakulla, it was like my longest dive there was about 22 hours long. Because of those dives, we were sometimes wearing 2 rebreathers, carrying a whole bunch of tanks, a scientific diving package, a backup scooter, and, before all was said and done, you had, you know, 600 or more pounds of stuff on your body, including,
yeah.
that mapper. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
is there I mean, obviously, so, you breathe, your oxygen goes through, it gets scrubbed. Is there a certain amount at which the scrubbing material kind of reaches, a
Mhm.
capacity? Like, what
Yeah.
is the ultimate limit on a
Yeah.
rebreather?
Yeah, for the listeners that don't know what a rebreather is, it's like differs from normal scuba gear where, scuba gear, you're making bubbles as you exhale. The rebreather is recapturing those bubbles to recirculate or recycle them. They send it through a scrubber, a material that removes the carbon dioxide from the loop, and then small injections of oxygen are added to make up for what your body's metabolized. But the scrubber, as you so rightly identify, is time limited. So it depending on the material that's in there and how much of that material and the design of the rebreather and the depth that you're going to go, there's a lot of different factors that all lead to how long you can use that scrubber for. Now, the rebreather that Bill developed was quite revolutionary. Well, I mean, it was new, but even today it would be labeled revolutionary if people were still diving that one because it had a very special scrubber design, and it could actually take a unconventional scrubber material, unconventional to recreational divers, that would lead to the ability to use it for 24 hours, where most scrubbers are in the 4 to 6 hour range. But the other thing that Bill did is he designed a scrubber that could be fully immersed in water. The chemical materials inside the scrubber are volatile when they get wet, and so this particular one had a hydrophobic membrane that would keep it dry as well. So that even meant that we could potentially change a scrubber underwater if we needed to.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
so then arguably, if you can just keep changing the scrubber underwater, you could arguably just keep as long as the amount of scrubbers you have down there, you could just keep going,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's an interesting point because at some point your body reaches equilibrium with the nitrogen and the helium that you're not metabolizing, like it can't take any more gas, and so you're at saturation level, meaning that if you stay down longer, you're not going to net any more decompression time. It's just going to stay the same, and that actually happened to us when we were reaching some of our longer dives. We sort of had reached that saturation point. Which is pretty cool, pretty interesting. Yeah.
Now, do you get that because you're in the water? Because then the people who go down into the bells, like, working wise,
Mhm.
they sometimes
They're saturated. Yeah.
they're saturated, but it takes them
Weeks to come back.
exactly, weeks,
Yeah.
yeah. So what's
Yeah, it's
how does
'cause
that
they're
work?
they're diving deeper. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So, I
gotcha.
mean, our decompressions, I think there were people on our team that did decompressions as long as 20 hours. My longest deco time was, I think, 17 hours. Yeah,
What do you do to
yeah.
keep yourself entertained? I know you have games on your Shearwater or something, or what do you
Yeah, yeah. No, Shearwater didn't even exist then. Oh, yeah, yeah,
what were you guys doing there for 17
yeah.
hours? They
Yeah,
how'd
the
you
first thing I would do is I mean, the deep stops are, like, faster, right? Like, you're starting your decompression about 260 feet deep, but they're short stops. They just get longer and longer as they get shallower, and so that's when it gets really boring. The safety divers would come down and, play tic-tac-toe. I would keep, writing notes of things that I observed during the dive or, going through my surveys and things. I'd read books underwater.
okay.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
actually brought down,
yeah.
waterproof books and stuff, okay.
Yeah, you don't even need but back in the day, you didn't even need waterproof books, like, the paper quality was better, so you could read your book, right? Bring it out of the water, and it would dry in a big clump of, like, pages and stuff, but you take it back underwater again, and you could pick up where
Wow,
you left off.
okay, no idea. Now when did they start incorporating the bells so that, like, you could actually go up
Mhm.
into a dry bell and then
Yeah,
eat lunch?
yeah. Yeah, we set up a system where, like, we put a barge on the surface with a recompression chamber on it. And then we thought, okay, if we could just get people into the recompression chamber safely, then it would be much better than decompressing underwater, where if anything goes wrong, you're going to drown. So what we did is we rented a transfer capsule from the Gulf of Mexico oil industry, and we Bill designed and built a whole hoist to go on the barge. So literally, once we got to about like 120 feet in our decompression profile, we could swim into the bottom of this bell, and there was just enough room for 2 divers, you know. So we pull ourselves up into the bell, close the door, pressurize it at that depth. So you're literally packaged at 120 feet.
Gotcha.
Then it gets hoisted to the surface and locked in horizontally to, the recompression chamber, and the door, like, is sealed basically so that you have a double lock. So then, we would be able to move from that cramped little wet transfer capsule into a dry recompression chamber to finish our deco. So we might do, like, 12 hours or 10 hours, in a dry chamber where you could eat and talk and rest.
So they're
Yeah.
basically like he took a recompression chamber and just put it down 120 feet, so to speak, so that you could basically be recompressing, but just in a dry environment, and he did it with, like, an airlock kinda deal?
Well, yeah, the recompression chamber stayed on the surface, just the transfer capsule went down to depth to pick us up like an elevator and then locked us in, and, we would move across, crawl into the recompression chamber. Yeah.
Wow, okay,
Yeah,
alright, gotcha, gotcha.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's I mean, imagine all of that infrastructure, right? Like, we raised all the money for that ourselves, all the people on the project were volunteers, including, like, chamber operation and everything, so we had to learn how to do everything. Like, Bill had to design the hoist system, you know, how the whole barge would put together, and we had to develop all those protocols too.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he really is a genius, it's pretty incredible.
Absolutely.
Well, and
Absolutely.
then so that ties into so okay, so then you went down and you were diving in the pit, which,
Mhm.
I've dove up to the point at which basically you have, like, the hydrogen sulfide cloud kinda coming up and you have the
Yeah.
rock. Then I had no idea even when I dove it, that it keeps going down around that, like, little mount,
Yeah, yeah, a
and that's
long way.
where a long way, yeah. So, I guess if you don't
Yeah,
mind telling us a little bit about, that
yeah,
expedition and then obviously
mhm,
what happened, which I think,
mhm.
towards the end of it.
Yeah. No, my interest in the pit came when, like, my friend Kay Walton and Dan Linz had found the pit, and they found it on a shallow dive because, you know, most of the caves in Mexico, in the Yucatan are shallow, right? And at the time, there was no knowledge of any deep holes at all. So they had on a 40, 35, 40-foot dive, come from a sinkhole called Tikimich, which pops out into the pit. And when they got there, they were like, "What? There's no walls or floors or ceiling for reference. My God, this is huge." So they told us about this, and they said, "It's a shame there's no cave going there." And they had dived down that debris mound through the hydrogen sulfide on air and not seen anything, and said, it's a, it's a really cool sinkhole, but it's a shame there's no deep cave." And so Paul and I went and dived it, and we got down there and we found Deep Cave. Also on air, which is a little disturbing.
Yeah, because it's like, I wanna say what, just to the mount is like around 100, a hundred and
Yeah.
ten feet, right? So then it starts to get into the cave at what, like maybe 125, 130?
Actually deeper. Yeah, yeah. So, we actually on our first big cave dive there, diving on air, we tied off at 306. Yeah, I know, it's crazy in today's landscape, but, you know, at the time, there was no there was no helium, available in Mexico. There was, no regular, rebreather diving or anything like that, and so, um, after that, we came out, we're like, "Oh my god, we gotta get the rebreathers back here."
Wait, so how did you
We
have
can't
enough
tell
time
anyone. Yeah,
how did you have enough time on air to go to
yeah,
306 in the cave and get back? How
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we did
wow.
it. I'm not proud of it in today's context, but and it was strangely, almost acceptable back then. But, I do remember on that dive, I was at 265 and Paul's like going to tie off the reel because I'm like, it's time to go. And he's like, I just got to tie off. And he dropped down like and at that point, I'm going, "No! No! Too deep, too deep!" Watching a neutron bomb of silt come up as he's trying to tie off the reel, and I'm like, "Ah!" So we
Yeah.
actually kept the secret for a couple of years before we got back there with our rebreathers, and were able to properly explore it with the right technology. Yeah.
Gotcha. But now, so on that one, do you guys find it? You guys get
Mhm.
down to 306, so then you're like, "Okay, we need to
Mhm.
go back."
Mhm.
Did you keep doing it on air, or were you going to the rebreather at that point, once you had figured that out?
When we went back, finally, with the rebreathers, that opened the door for everything, but that's also when I got bent. So,
That's what I was gonna
yeah,
say,
yeah,
and with you getting
yeah.
bent also brings up a question that I think
Uh-huh,
I've had that I don't know if is and tell us about how your experience with getting bent, but
uh-huh,
also you went back to do an, uh, like, going back underwater to, put yourself back. Usually, I mean, I think
mhm,
there's like a controversy now that kinda says whether or not you should basically go
mhm.
back in the water to get.
Yeah, it's called in-water recompression. So, I had always planned on the project that if something happened to one of us, that we would do in-water recompression, and the reason was because it was so remote in the jungle back then. You couldn't just drive there, you had to hike through the bush with machetes. So, I knew that if someone needed treatment, we'd have to do it in place. And there's protocols for those from commercial diving, and now there are protocols in technical diving for how to conduct safe in-water recompression. So if you can't get to a chamber, and somebody needs treatment, it's totally viable way to go if the person is well enough and you have the right gear to protect them and keep them safe. So in water recompression is becoming a more important part of technical diving education when people are on remote expeditions and things. Yeah.
Gotcha. Why did it start to come up in the thing? Like, why was it, I mean, it makes complete and logical sense, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
but why did it kind of become, controversial that they were like, "No, you don't wanna go back in?" Is it just because was there incidences with people who were
I
maybe
mean,
not entirely with it, or.
it's all about risk. I mean, obviously, you can't take a really sick person back underwater safely. Like, you would certainly want to have a full face mask because you're taking them underwater to far exceed oxygen toxicity levels. So there's, a likelihood that they could have a seizure underwater. So you need to protect them from drowning. So if someone's getting back in the water for in-water recompression without a plan, without the right gear, then yeah, that's definitely, questionable in terms of safety. And if you're in reasonable range of a recompression chamber, do that.
Yeah, that's the better
You know,
option.
do it dry. I know it's expensive, but but
But it's
do
worth
it
it.
dry and safe. Yeah. So there are always risks, and the question is, is an average technical diver um, prepared enough to assess the risks and make the right choice for someone? Because when you're bent yourself, you can't make the right choices for yourself. You really need an advocate to help support you and make the right choices. Yeah.
Well, and so how did you go about with
Uh-huh.
your decision with it? And I
Uh-huh.
mean, and for you, how did you do something different that day, or was this kind of where the bends can, and I talked about this with Richie, is
Yeah.
you could do
Anyone.
you could and it could be the same thing. You could do the same
Yeah.
profile, have nothing different,
Yep.
whatever, but, like, something physiologically was
Mhm.
different about you that day. Is that kind of what happened to you?
Yeah, plus, 1 out of 3 people has some degree of a PFO, a patent foramen ovale, a small, opening, in between the sides of their heart that didn't heal after they were born, because 'cause we're all born with the PFO, and that makes you, much more susceptible to getting bent. So 1 in 3 people are, walking around with a susceptibility that they don't even know they have. So yeah, I mean, diving is a crapshoot. Tech diving is a bigger crapshoot, and then if you're diving around 400 feet deep, then it's a total crapshoot. And if you're a woman, the statistics, the all the tables were really built with men. So who knows? Yeah,
Gotcha. And so how did you just start getting major pains in your joints? What was it that you were like, "Oh boy," like, "Oh shit," like,
yeah.
really,
Yeah. No, I was underwater about 60 feet on deco when I suddenly felt this weird niggling in my thighs, like this crawling sensation. And I actually truly thought there were bugs inside my dry suit at first. And then I thought, oh crap," and I thought, "I'm bent," and it all s the pictures started to come together in my mind, and I thought, "Oh, no," you know? So, yeah, I felt it underwater, an impending feeling of doom. I know that sounds weird, but if anyone's been bent, they know that feeling. Um yeah, so I stayed underwater extra. I hung out to lengthen my deco. I got out of the water carefully, and I thought that I was symptom free when I got out of the water, but when I climbed this ladder out of the cenote and put in that physical effort, and interestingly enough, when you do that sort of like, bearing down strength, carrying weight bearing exercise, that's exactly the motion that could send bubbles through a PFO if you have one, like climbing a ladder back onto a boat, crawling out of the water with, stage bottles on, that kind of a thing. So that grunting will potentially force, gases across the septum and cause DCS. So is that what happened to me? I don't know if I have a PFO even to this day, but once I got out of the water, then I started to feel quite ill, and I started to get this bruising mottled rash on my biceps and thighs, and, all I could do was lay down and breathe like a rich oxygen mix. But it was the next day that I decided to get back in the water on Pure O2 down to 40 feet to do a commercial diving in water recompression schedule to improve my situation.
Now, and you said so 40 feet on Pure O2? Because again, I mean, you guys change all the numbers from what we're ever told because
Yeah,
people don't go below 20 on Pure O2.
correct. Yeah, so at 20 feet, you're at 1.6 PO2 on pure O2. If you go to a recompression chamber, they'll put you at 60 feet on O2, but you're dry, right? So if you have a seizure, then you're not gonna drown. You're just gonna have a seizure in a chamber. If so that's why we cut off at 1.6 or 20 feet, 6 meters, oxygen exposure for divers. But an in-water recompression treatment, suggests going a little bit deeper to get more oxygen into the tissues and help flush out the body, but it should be done with a full face mask. I didn't have a full face mask on that trip, but I decided to take my chances. Yeah.
Gotcha, and
Mhm.
was it you think you said you were Paul, was he, like, at least there to just keep the reg in your mouth? Because that was also I had no idea, and Richie was telling me is you're not gonna most people, you're not necessarily gonna die on the Pure O2 or
No,
oxygen toxicity poisoning. It's that you're gonna
you're gonna
black
seize
out,
and
have
drown.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
spit the reg out is when you're gonna drown kinda deal, yeah.
Right, and yeah, that's always what happens with people that seize underwater. They lose the regulator and drown. Yeah, yeah,
Gotcha, so you would
yeah,
need a buddy to just keep that thing in your mouth,
yeah,
if God
yeah.
forbid that happened. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's why full face mask is really great, but that's also why, a lot of rebreather divers wear gag straps, like a strap that physically holds mouthpiece in their mouth. If they seize, then they're not gonna drown.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Mhm,
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
mhm,
I was in California, and there was a girl who she went down and she blacked out,
mm.
down at, like, 50, 60 feet. I think it was the cold or whatever. But I guess the trachea or something, from my understanding, does it close up for a very short period of time as, like, the body's way of protecting you, where water doesn't necessarily get in right away? And then
Depends,
'cause
yeah,
when
it
when she
depends.
came up, she
Yeah,
never coughed up
yeah.
any, you know?
Wow, she's very, very, very lucky. Um, Also, sometimes, if somebody is using pure oxygen and takes it too deep, like accidental use of oxygen, thinking they're on their back gas, when they seize, they often don't drown and don't embolize because it's pure oxygen. Um,